Micah allegedly was talking to Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones about what could potentially become. He directed them to David Mulugheta. Jerry Jones was asked about that. He said, I don't know who that is. Well, he's about to learn. He's about to learn about who, David Mulugheta is. Today, there was a couple quotes that have come out from Jory Epstein about Jerry Jones speaking about the situation. He once again said, most everything that I've ever had success with, I've overpaid for. But I'll tell you, I've had it well analyzed when I did it. Usually, I'm a fat payer. I'm not bashful about sending the money out. What he just said there, I'll let you know, I'm well analyzed when I do this, though. It is worth it, which leads to the next quote that he says about Micah Parsons. Jerry Jones on Micah Parsons, to be the player that he wants to be paid as, he has to be a tremendous leader for the Dallas Cowboys. I want to personally have total and complete satisfaction that I've got a commitment from him and that I can see that it's not just contract talk. So what he's saying is, first of all, when I overpay people, it's well analyzed. In my heart and in my brain, when I lay my head down, this is good money going to a good person. So him then coming out and saying, I want Micah to be the guy here. Mm-hmm. If this is how this is going to be, I want him to be the guy. And I would like to know that and have total, complete satisfaction that that's going to be the case. I assume that's Jerry saying why he was talking directly to Micah before Micah kind of led him to David Mulugheta. But it does feel like Jerry's going to inevitably pay Micah. But that's an interesting statement that he's saying publicly, basically to Micah, saying, hey, if this is what you want to act like and this is what you want to get paid as, this is what we need. Every snap, every down, every meeting, every day, you got to be our guy. Not saying that he isn't, but this is Jerry just publicly basically stating his expectations of Micah when he inevitably pays him, in my eyes.
Yeah, see, I feel like this is just, he's trying to motivate / negotiate through the press. I mean, if you're Micah and you hear this, he's not saying you're not the guy that we need, but I guess he's saying, hey, if we go ahead and we do this and we pay you what you rightfully deserve, you're basically you're not the face of the franchise, but you're definitely one of them, and you have to act that way and has to trickle down through the locker room. There's a lot that goes with it. So he's probably just telling them, hey, you got to continue on your path and continue to grow and mature as a pro.
Yeah, and there was, an ultimatum reported to Aaron Rodgers that was inevitably not true. All parties said it wasn't true, but it was quoted where, you're not doing that asshole Pat McAfee show, okay, if you come back here. Allegedly that was said, and then that was debunked immediately by all parties involved. But you do wonder what Jerry thinks about the Micah Parsons podcast.
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
You do wonder what Jerry and Steven and everybody is like, hey, if we're paying, you're not going to be going on your thing just talking shit about our, this is not,
Yeah.
And Mike is like, well, I'm trying to build my brand. People are interested. I'm one of the greatest young players in the league. I'm electrifying. I have a good personality, good work ethic. I'm having a good time. But if you would like the money that you are asking for, there's going to have to be a way you go about doing this. I do wonder if that is the case. I'm not saying that's definitely in there, but I think all of that shit goes into, if you want to be a franchise player, you're going to have to act how I would like our franchise player to act. What are those things? How will Mulugheta navigate the waters? Perfectly, I assume. David Mulugheta is the guy to kind of get it done. So I think we all assume he's going to get paid a lot of money. What does it look like going forward with Micah is the question.
Yeah, and when it comes to being a leader, you would assume that what Jerry's looking for is for more of the kind of in locker room conversations that sometimes do leak onto the podcast. Kind of looking around the league, you could maybe say, Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of one of those guys who's at that level, but still does kind of the weekly podcast type thing. But even that is with his brother. They have, guests on the show a lot. I remember a few years back, maybe it was last year or 2 years ago, when Micah was supposed to do the weekly thing with Undisputed, I believe, with Skip and Shannon, and then that kind of blew up. I think right after his first appearance, maybe his second appearance, and then obviously we all see what happens with the podcast. A lot of times he goes on there and he just says some ridiculous stuff that typically gets into the headlines. And then even the traveling around, I think he was with CJ Stroud in Japan last year. And granted, that is the off season. That is
go live your life.
Yeah, when you.
But if we're going to pay you $40 million a year, your life is going to look a little different publicly. Is probably what Jerry and them are saying.
Yes.
If I had to guess.
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
That's exactly what I was kind of reiterating too. Is just like those type of things that are very in the public eye, because he is Micah Parsons. Like, it's not as if he's a rookie here. You know, you've talked about it before. Hey, I wasn't gonna be tweeting and doing all of that bullshit with the Colts if I wasn't performing well. Like, Micah Parsons he's a superstar. He's unbelievable. He does play very well, and it kind of gets down to the point where, like, the only downside to Micah thus far has been the off the field shit with the podcast, with those things.
Something he said taken out of context, something he said maybe not how he wanted to say it, something he said not landing right. Like, we're in this world, so we very much understand
completely.
It. Anytime you get on a mic, there's a chance that your shit's going to get taken out of context. There's a chance that it's not going to land how you wanted it to land. Your intentions of your message might have been a good delivery, but what people heard or wanted to hear is actually how they take it, and then all of a sudden you're in the middle of a storm. And the storm is a distraction, and winning is already hard enough. So if it is about all these things, which we assume.
From that quote.
We assume that is what it is. We could be wrong, but that is just us looking at the situation, trying to understand what an 80-plus-year-old man could be thinking that is running a team, and saying, hey, if you $40 million a year we're paying a pass rusher, if that is the case, we're going to need all energies going towards how do we make the star better? Every moment is how do we go about doing that? And what we would say to Micah is, Micah, podcasts maybe not as prevalent whenever you're done, but there will be some form of content that you'll be able to create whenever you're done. If you're going to get record-breaking money like this, keep the main thing for as long as you can keep the main thing. And all the other stuff, whatever you're allowed to do, certainly do it. But no, with the career you're about to have as a Dallas Cowboy and the personality that you've already showcased, you're going to be A-OK whenever this whole thing is over. I know it can be hard to be patient and wait for that. And maybe have a emergency podcast if you think something is not being reported accurately or talked about in a proper standpoint. But do not let the side shit ever interrupt the main shit, because the main shit is $40 million a year, seemingly, is what the main stuff is. And now, granted, you can get that with the side shit as well. Let's not get crazy. You can certainly make that amount of money. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a lot of strategy. It's going to take a lot of commitment, same amount of commitment it's going to take to get to the quarterback. So we, as people that don't know Micah, would just like to say, if this is the only thing that is potentially holding up this deal getting done, go ahead and understand the podcast will be there whenever you are done sacking quarterbacks for $40 million a year, if that is potentially the case. And I know that sounds hypocritical potentially as somebody that had a podcast while I was playing and did a stand-up tour while I was playing and had a merch company while I was playing. I knew I was 2 shanks away, from this thing is over at all times. And also, I'm making $2.5 million a year. And I don't think I'm the face of a franchise. $40 million a year, face of the franchise. The side money will come. The main money is very, very good. And that's just unsolicited advice from somebody that does not know Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I mean, because he had the situation, I think it was even last year, where like he's on the podcast and they're doing their top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, and he doesn't put Dak on there, and like whether that was, I'm sure that was just like an oversight,
said, omitting Dak.
Yeah, exactly. But like that doesn't get out, and that's all anyone's talking about, and like to the brand part of it. Like, obviously, none of us are in that situation. Like, he's one of the biggest stars in the NFL, so it's kind of like strike while the iron's hot. But I'm sure part of that, too, is like, hey, listen, like, the what you're going to be able to achieve by being one of the stars of the Cowboys, like, we have the strongest brand in all of sports. Like, you don't need your podcast necessarily to, like that, like you said, that is always going to be there. But if you do everything right on the field, like, you're going to make more money than you have any idea what to do with, because you're going to be one of the biggest stars on the planet.
Yeah, and you look at the booths, okay?
Yeah.
And that's just like a direct indicator of like who. It's like the Cowboys have a pipeline into a booth.
Yes,
I'm not saying Micah's going to want to do a booth, but that pipeline those are like the most difficult jobs to get.
Yes.
Because there's only so many. Can turn that pipeline to a studio show or to your own show or to your own, like the Jerry Jones Dallas Cowboys funnel of shit after life, I think, after football life is very large. So I hope that's not holding it up. And this is once again us just assuming that this is all this thing, but you couldn't help but assume that is a part of Jerry Jones's thinking, AJ Hawk.
I mean, I think about it as well. Yeah, of course, keep the main thing, like the oldest coaching cliche situation. It makes a lot of sense, but it could be a lot worse. Like, what if, he's out there, he got a couple DUIs, he's robbing gas stations. Like it could be much worse. The fact that this is the off the field stuff we're talking about, it's a new time. I mean, like, yeah, especially guys coming up. Guys are in high school with shows and putting content and stuff. So this is going to be something they're going to deal with. It's just, do you have the awareness to know, like, I better be producing. Like, if I'm going to be doing this sideshow stuff, I have to produce, and it should motivate you to produce even more.
For me, it was 1,000%, because as soon as Chuck Pagano gets to Indianapolis, I have my first meeting with him. He looked sweet. He had Ferragamo. He looked really cool.
Of course.
It was very nice to meet him, And they tried to replace me immediately with another punter, especially because I was tweeting and everything like that. And then they heard the sound at practice one time, and they understood that was probably not going to happen. Okay, like that is... Welcome to the bomb show, brothers. And that was they brought in numerous guys to try to take me out. I had to learn how to become a directional punter in one off season, because they were basically like, hey, we're directional punting, and if you can't do it, you're gone. They wanted me out of there. I understood it. Like, it was very clear. And I taught myself how to directional punt, which everybody should be able to do. The only reason why I didn't is because I didn't know how to punt whenever I got drafted. So it was just a new thing. I added it in there. But they were trying to get rid of me for sure. No question about it. And then I think they got to know me a little bit and everything like that. And Chuck presented one time. He was like, why don't you stop tweeting? And I was like, hey, back in the day, I was out 4 nights a week. Okay? Having a pretty good time. A little bit too much of a good time. You seen the mugshot, obviously. Now I'll put out a tweet about something I'm watching while I'm laying in my bed. Okay? If I shank some balls, you can get rid of me. But if I'm tweeting about a Real Housewives episode or tweeting about something happening in my life, just know that, like, that in comparison to a lot of other things could be vastly different. And Chuck said, deal, he said, deal, you got it. And then obviously I go on to have my best stuff from being under that umbrella and going through it all. But I knew that I was literally 3 bad tweets away and 2 shanks away from being kicked out of town, But that does heighten the sense of everything, Heightens practice. It's like, hey, if I want to do all this stuff and set up myself up for post-career, which punting money, great. Overpaid, grotesquely overpaid as a punter to kick balls. 1,000%. I am not saying that is not the case, but also that money's not lasting forever, So, like, if I want to set up myself forever, I have to make sure that this is locked tight, and I am when I'm there, I'm first earliest. I'm a positive for this team as a punter, as opposed to this guy has a Twitter account and he's shitbird. It's like all those things kind of go together. More conversation from Katie Blackburn, chief. I forget she is the
VP.
COO?
The EVP of the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, I forget which. Oh, not even in the C-suite there. That is interesting. EVP. She's running the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, she was in the news because of the Trey Hendrickson comment, where she said at some point he's got to be happy with what we offered him. And, that came out on April Fool's. We talked to Trey Hendrickson about it. He didn't expect it. I assume Katie Blackburn on the backside that's not what there's a feeling about negotiations where, like, both sides have to be happy. Like, that's what I was referring to. Whatever the case, seemingly did not fare well in the crowd with that particular statement. Then something else came out through Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, where, he reported about a quote from Kelsey Conway and Katie Blackburn. Kelsey Conway reporting it like, oh, maybe the Bengals aren't in Paycor Stadium anymore because they have to give a 1-year heads up to Hamilton County, which is obviously the county that Cincinnati is within and owns the stadium there. They have to give them a 1-year head up that they would like a 2-year extension on the lease that they currently have. And in that conversation, which was a great question, by the way, and I don't think any of us even knew this was potentially coming up. Nope. So I appreciate the journalism and all. She said at one point, we could, I guess, go wherever we wanted after this year if we didn't pick up the option, okay? And what the Cincinnati Bengals journalists are saying, that the way that reads versus the way it was actually said is not, like, she basically was like, I guess we could go somewhere else. And then she also basically alluded to, like, when that decision comes time, which is in June of this particular summer, like, we'll make the decision then. Like, we'll make that's when right now we're not focused on that, is kind of how she laid it out. But I think a lot of people were burying her for saying this. And if you listen to the people that were in the room where it happened, that was not the context at all. Although, this is high stakes here.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you're talking about a team with a stadium, we've obviously seen these conversations happen in the past. Now, this would be the Bengals leasing Paycor Stadium from the county that Cincinnati is in for another 2 years. They have 5 options, a 2-year extension, so that'd be another 10 years. They have to give a year heads up in that whole thing. So they're doing business with the county. Are they renting it? Are they leasing it for 13 times a year for preseason games, regular season games, then potential playoff games if they were to take place at home? And then do they rent it out to, concerts and everything? I don't know how the business goes because we didn't get all the information. We don't have the contract that it has. But anytime a team says, maybe we do have some freedom on the stadium. Happened in Minnesota, they were going to move. Minnesota was going to move out of town because they weren't able to round up a new stadium. This would not be for a new stadium, but I think it would be for a new deal with the people that own the stadium, because she even alludes, we would like it to be best for both of us here. So she's using this as leverage, I assume, which all teams will do with their stadium. And then the city is probably just waiting, to see what you do. And I don't think this is a raised taxes situation because they don't need to build a new stadium, but it's certainly something that needs to get figured out. And I remember there was a time before I got here in Indianapolis, RCA Dome was the Colts stadium. And allegedly the story goes, because Jim Irsay has a house in Los Angeles, he was in LA and he was in a helicopter and he was flying either to his house or from his house. And then somebody, leaked back to Indianapolis that Jim Irsay was in a helicopter in Los Angeles. And that was always the city that was kind of getting dangled over all these other stadiums and cities' heads. Like, hey, we'll pick up and go to Los Angeles. You don't want to give us a new stadium. We'll pick up and leave. I don't think Jim was even looking for stadium sites. I think Jim was literally just going to his house in Los Angeles. But then it got reported that he was looking in LA. And then all of a sudden there's a vote. And all of a sudden Lucas Oil Stadium is kind of built. And the city owns it. The Colts pay a lease each year, so they don't get to have all the money for all the other events that take place. But it's like, this is very normal for NFL teams to do. Happened in St. Louis, obviously, so much so that they got up and left. Happened in San Diego. They got up and left. Both of them went to Los Angeles. People talk about San Antonio wants a team. Like, every time a team needs something, they will certainly find a location that could, hey, these people would love it over here. I don't think that's what's happening here, though. And that's kind of how it was being talked about. I don't think that is the case here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, it absolutely reads like that's what she was hinting at, like suggesting, hey, if we don't get something done, like relocation is a possibility. And I don't think, if you look into it a little bit more, and obviously like how important the Bengals are to Cincinnati and everything, but this also seems like a situation like you said, she's got a lot of other stuff on her plate right now in terms of like the Trey Hendrickson stuff and everything. So a decision on this doesn't need to be made till next year. But you would also think like there's no way the city wants to bungle this either. Good exactly. I didn't even try to do that, but they want this to get done as well. I mean the situation where it's at in Cincinnati, in between the two stadiums, with like all the bars right there, like what it does for the local economy on game days and everything. Like they want to make sure this gets done too. And I think anyone who jumped to the conclusion like, oh man, they might be relocating, like obviously like that is not going to happen.
I don't think it helped coming off the heels of yesterday.
Well, Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Trey Hendrickson thing, I believe that that was a dumb. Listen, you're running an NFL team. There's a lot. Okay, every word is scrutinized. Billions of dollars at play, hundreds of millions at play. There's a lot. I think alluding to somebody who's the sack king, all-pro, a guy that doesn't get a lot of respect outside of a building, kind of speaking in a way lacking respect inside the building. Don't know if that's the best way to get things done. And Trey Hendrickson obviously was like, what the hell? We haven't even talked in a couple months, basically. So I think that was certainly a mistake, and I assume she would say the same thing. This whole, I guess we could go somewhere else, I don't think that was vindictive at all. I think it was just like her speaking as a matter of fact. Like, I guess we could go somewhere else, but she was just answering a question.